An electrified statue, a secret nuclear bunker hidden in plain sight, and a cat washing ceremony at the tower. It must be time to once more delve into a few more questionable stories shared around London as fact, when they may well be fiction. Today on Macabre London, we uncover a few more supposed myths about the city and see if we can bust them. Everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Macabre London. I'm Nikki Druce, your host with the silent G, and today I'll be taking you on a journey down another of London's grimy backstreets to uncover a macabre tale from the city's past. Today we're going to be exploring a few more myths from London and see if we can work out fact from fiction and get to the origins of why some tales may be rooted in more truth than we first thought. However, before we get into today's story, if you're new here and you want to see more videos where we deep dive into some lesser known historic tales from London, and in fact all over the world and beyond, then please don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Also, if you like the show and you have done for a while now, then why not consider becoming a patron? You get your very own podcast feed filled with bonus episodes of my other show, Having a Problem, which is a lot of silly historical fun, and I just know you're going to love it. So if that sounds like something you'd enjoy, then the link is in the description. Or just go to patreon.com/Macabre London so I can continue to regale you with the haunted history we both love and a little bit extra too. Now, today's episode is a little shorter, and that's because I have a very exciting thing to announce, which will already be waiting for you in your podcast feed right now. But my other podcast, Killers, Cults and Queens, is back for its long-awaited season 2, and so I'll be sharing a teaser of that in a separate clip today on your podcast feed, if you want to check it out, and giving you a little intro to the season as well. I know many of you have been very patiently waiting, and it's been very difficult to keep it under wraps whilst we've been recording, but I won't say much more here as I'll be saying it on the teaser, so do make sure you check it out, and if you're not that bothered, no worries, just enjoy today's episode and skip the teaser when it pops up. Normal programming will resume after that. So, for these Mythbuster episodes, I like to take a more casual approach to the stories we look at, and to delve into some of the taller tales which get perpetuated among residents and tourists alike. Some of these stories get taken on and spread as verbatim, such as the Great Fire of London stopping the plague, which, spoiler alert, it didn't. But as you can see, they have a tendency to weave their way into the fabric of the city's lore, and I can see why, as sometimes spreading a good yarn is far more fun than the truth. So today, allow me to tell you a few tall tales from the city, and we'll work out together if they're true or they're myths to be busted. Now, last time we delved into London's myths, we looked at the ravens who live in the Tower of London. But what if I told you there used to be a few other animals that lived there, some which are definitely not native to London, or even Europe for that matter? The Tower of London was the original site of London Zoo. In a large room within the tower was held the first collection of exotic animals in the whole of the country. From as early as the 1200s, unusual non-native species were kept as part of the collection, and for over 600 years, exotic animals lived inside the safety of the tower's walls. In times before humans knew better, exotic animals were given as gifts to reigning monarchs by other people high up on the social scale, as a sign of their wealth and power. If you were a king or queen, it was similar to being gifted as an influencer by a brand, in the hopes that you would speak favourably about the giftee. This meant that many palace staff would be sent crates with animals inside them, and then it would be their responsibility to look after them, regardless of how dangerous that animal was, or even if they had anywhere to put them in the first place. When 3 lions were gifted to Henry III in 1235 by Frederick II, the Holy Roman Emperor, Henry was chuffed to bits. But things didn't go quite as he'd imagined. Firstly, the animals were sent to him as leopards, but as it turned out, this was just lost in translation, and these were in fact 3 fully grown adult lions, and not the smaller and known to be a bit more friendlier leopards. However, Henry wasn't put off, and he kept the animals as they matched his heraldic crest, which also had 3 lions upon it. And ever since then, the 3 lions became an integral part of royal imagery and adopted as an English symbol forevermore, and as are still seen on the England football team shirts today. This first acquisition into the collection soon sparked a new hyper-focus for Henry, and he got big into keeping weird and wonderful animals. However, it would take a bit of time before anything new was added. In 1255, a polar bear came to be part of the collection, when it was gifted by the King of Norway, a native animal from his country. To allow the bear some freedom, he was kept with an iron collar around his neck, to which a long chain would be clipped, but in order to do so, he would be muzzled to avoid him chomping through any of the staff on a regular basis. The huge bear could then swim in the Thames and return when he wanted. This meant he could also fish for his own food, which cut down on the costs for the tower, which would be quite important as they soon had another big mouth to feed. Just a year later, an African elephant was added to the collection. People in their thousands flocked to see the strange creature, many of which had no idea even existed up until one was gifted to the royals by the King of France. But the size of the accommodation that was allowed for the elephant was far too small, and what with there being no knowledge available as to how to care for it, things were always going to end badly. Unfortunately, after just 2 years residing at the tower, the pachyderm passed away. As the years passed, animals just kept on being given to the many royals which lived inside its towers. As the collection grew, the creatures themselves got their own space. The now demolished Lion Tower was built specifically at the front of the tower for a few different reasons, but mainly because of one thing: the smell. Noise would have also played an important factor, and as I myself have worked in a few zoos during my time, one of which where my office was very close to the lion's den, I can attest that when they get going at dusk, they are loud. It's not an unpleasant sound, but it is somewhat unnerving, so it would have made sense to put the zoo far away from the luxury the royal residence required. Over time, lions, leopards and tigers would all live together in less than ideal conditions, but the animals did breed a lot, and often these cubs were taken, hand-reared using surrogate lactating animals such as goats to feed from. This meant that some lucky visitors were told they could safely interact with a few of the tame animals. But of course, you and I both know that there is no such thing as a tame big cat. But people didn't know this yet, and so this often ended in tragedy or maulings. When one visitor, a woman by the name of Mary Jenkinson, approached a lion and tried to touch its paw, the lion reared up and swatted Mary, and she retaliated, but she was no match for the animal, which killed her within a matter of minutes, much to the horror of the terrified onlookers. In the 1600s, the menagerie was at its peak. Many animals had been added, and James I built a new enclosure for the lions, which was a bit nicer for them, and had a large water fountain for them to play in and drink from. This new enclosure did have some drawbacks though, in the fact that the general public could just climb down to the big cats if they wanted to, but it also made it easy to pay for entry into the zoo via the way of a cat or dog which would be tossed to the animals to eat. During this time as well, dogs would be put in with individual lions as a spectator sport to see who would win in a fight. Of course, it was nearly always the lion, and the fight was usually just for entertainment to the visiting crowds. By the 1700s, the care of the animals was becoming a bit better. They were starting to be named. One animal which had such a privilege was called Miss Jenny, a cheetah who was gifted to Sir George Pigott, the president of the East India Company. He employed a keeper, John Morgan, who came from India to care for Miss Jenny while she lived at the tower, and she was walked around on a lead, and the pair had a sweet bond. But as attitudes towards animals began to change in the late 1700s, and what with the creation of the RSPCA in 1824, people began to realise that the menagerie at the tower was not fit for purpose. In 1831, a new type of attraction opened in London, the Royal Zoological Society of London. In an age where science was advancing at a rapid rate, this new establishment promised to further its knowledge about the natural world and to actually learn about the animals and try to care for them in the best ways they knew how, rather than them simply being used for people's entertainment. In fact, for almost 20 years, access to viewing the animals at London Zoo was only for fellows of the society. These were people who either studied science or supported the zoo with financial donations. It was only later on that the public were allowed in, but it was in an attempt to educate the general populace about the natural world, and also to raise some much needed funds for the care of the animals, and to expand the resources to carry out more studies. Any animals that were left at the tower which didn't make it to the zoo were then sadly sold off to travelling menageries or circuses, something which was a very popular form of travelling entertainment for the time, and it was only as recently as 2020 that using wild animals in circus performances was banned in the UK. Although many circuses stopped using animals a number of years before this due to backlash from the public, but also the dangerous situations that happened as a result of mixing a few hundred people, particularly children, in a tent with wild animals. As you can imagine, the outcome was often not a pretty one. But anyway, what has all of this got to do with London myth? Because so far, all of this has been fact. Well, the myth lies, or should that be lions, in the tower's big cat residence. During the latter half of the 19th century, mysterious tickets were presented on a particular day for a number of years to the tower's yeoman warders. The tickets promised an event on site for which they'd been invited to, the washing of the lions. Many bamboozled people arrived at the tower clutching at tickets and had asked for the warders' help when they were struggling to find the white gate. Now, firstly, the tower doesn't even have a white gate, but secondly, the lions had all been removed by this point too. But these facts didn't seem to stop this from happening. Year on year, these tickets would be handed out and people would arrive in droves for the ceremony, only to be told they'd been had. When the warders asked them to take another look at the date, it all became clear. April the 1st. No one knows where the genuine-looking tickets came from. One person said it was a way to boost visitors from the tower themselves, and others attribute it to a comedy newspaper. But the fact is, no one really knows. This elaborate April Fool's joke was carried out for many a year, and over time it stopped being spread around. But every now and then it still rears, or should that be roars, its head, and people still ask where the lions are or when the warders will be washing them. But nowadays the only animal residents of the tower are that of the ravens, so maybe we should start bringing it back. I won't spoil the secret if you don't. So is there truth to the rumour that you can see a lion washed at the Tower of London on April the 1st? Well, no, but as with all good myths, there is quite a bit of truth behind its origin. Okay, so sticking with the animal theme, our next supposed myth is something which may sound shocking. Well, in terms of electricity, it definitely is. If you've ever walked by Parliament Square and the nearby Westminster Abbey area behind the Houses of Parliament, you'll see it's littered with statues of many politicians and changemakers of the past. But one particular statue seems different to all the others in that it's managed to escape something that's very common in London, and that's pigeon poo. Unlike poor Nelson stood atop his column in Trafalgar Square, who's usually drizzled like a bundt cake by the aerial assaults of the area's feathery residents, another war winner stays unblemished. Winston Churchill's statue always seems to be free of bird droppings, and that's for one supposed reason. His statue is electrified. Rumour has it that the reason pigeons don't decide to sit on Churchill's alluring metal frame is because when it was installed, it was wired into the mains with a very minor electrical current that runs through it. So how did this tale emerge? Well, before his death, it's said that Churchill was against having any statues of himself put in place, but he knew that when he did die, there would be one. But he didn't like the thought of being immortalised to then be routinely covered in bird poo for posterity. So when his statue was unveiled in 1973 by his wife Clementine, and at which Queen Elizabeth II gave a speech to commemorate the occasion, Winston's widow had let the installers know that the commemorative Churchill must have an electric current running through him. That's why whenever you see the statue today, it's always free from bird excrement. So does the poopy pigeon story hold any weight to it? Well, I'm sorry to burst your bubble on this one, but no, I'm afraid not. As it turns out, Churchill wasn't bothered about having a statue of himself erected, but he just thought it rather gauche to have it done whilst he was alive. But he picked out the spot where it would go in 1950, 15 years before he would pop his clogs. What's more likely is that the spot Churchill picked is not covered by any trees, and there's no real reason why a pigeon would want to perch there when there's plenty of other vantage points on the adjacent Abbey and the Houses of Parliament and the nearby St James's Park. So I'm afraid for this one, we have to say that it's a bona fide stinker of a myth, but if you're feeling brave the next time you're nearby, then give the statue a poke and see if you get a zap and report back. And if you thought the sound of that is literally electrifying, you're going to love what I have for you next. So I've been using the wonderful wellness shot that is Magic Mind for about 3 months now, and it's safe to say it's become a staple in my daily routine. If you're like me, constantly balancing a million things and trying to stay productive without hitting the inevitable wall, then this might be exactly what you need. I take these little shots in the morning to kickstart my day. I literally store them in my desk at my day job, and I down one before I attempt my inbox. With how hectic my research days and recording days can be, I really appreciate the long and sustained focus I get from Magic Mind, and I can definitely tell when I've not been drinking it. I'm a few months into drinking these little shots every day now, and the switch up has been incremental but noticeable. I find I'm much better at prioritising my tasks for the day, and I'm able to keep track of what I'm up to with less brain fog and a clearer idea of what's going on. It's really changing the game for me. And here's something else worth mentioning. For every bottle sold, Magic Mind donates to mental health charities. So not only are you investing in your own well-being, you're helping others too. It's a win-win. If you want to give Magic Mind a try for yourself, and you really should, head to magicmind.com/MacabreLT and use my code MacabreLT20 for up to 48% off your subscription. That's MACABRELT20. Honestly, after 3 months of using it, it's become an unskippable part of my daily routine. So if you're looking for something that will help you stay sharp and focused, I definitely recommend giving Magic Mind a try. And if you do, let me know. I'd love to hear how you found it. Now, moving on from Parliament Square, we're going to take a short stroll through St James's Park towards Buckingham Palace, the former home of Queen Elizabeth II and now home to the current monarch, King Charles III. And our next supposed myth is something to do with the royal residence itself and concerns the safety of those inside. Many of London's high security buildings, such as Number 10, the Houses of Parliament, the MI5 and MI6 building, are said to all have clever escape routes underneath them. The details of which are of course kept highly secret, and also some are touted as just rumours. But as we're learning so far, sometimes those rumours are very much based in at least a little bit of fact. Underneath Number 10, sticking with the theme of Winston Churchill, are the Cabinet War Rooms. Nowadays, this is a visitable tourist attraction, but up until 1984, nobody knew they existed, unless you were part of the inner circle in Parliament. This labyrinthine network of interconnected rooms were all kept hidden on purpose to make sure their position wasn't outed to the enemy, and so Churchill could remain hidden and safe underground. With this area being on show to the public nowadays, it has to be assumed that other arrangements have been made for a similar place for the Prime Minister to hold themselves up in should things go south. Buck Powell is said to be no different, with such a huge above-ground structure which is defendable from the roof and surrounded with huge barriers and an enormous garden out the back. It begs the question, is there something hiding underneath? And many people seem to think that yes, there is. Interestingly though, it may well be more elaborate than any of us could think of. The story goes that underneath the king's home is a tube station, equipped with a royal train, which the monarch can be shuffled onto. This tube line is said to run between Buckingham Palace, stops under number 10 Downing Street, and then heads on to an unlikely place, Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre. Now, for those of you that live in London, you'll more than likely know that the shopping centre is no more, having been demolished a few years ago to make way for more high-rise flats. But at one point, when the place was erected, it seemed like an odd choice to everyone nearby. The strange pop-up and very temporary-looking structure was created in 1965 to capitalise on the shopping boom after World War II. It was one of the first ever shopping centres in the whole of the country, but even back then it aged very quickly and looked out of date just a few years later. But still it managed to survive and outlive many of its competitors up until the modern day. With the death of the High Street encroaching on the UK during the 2010s, the Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre became a home for independent businesses, and most of the major chains moved out. But still, despite the teensy amount of money it must have been making, it was kept open, and many of the local residents believed it was only for one reason. The Elephant and Castle Shopping Centre was a cover for a huge nuclear bunker, one which would house the royals and government officials inside in the event of a nuclear disaster. A bunker which also conveniently had its own tube station, one which I can only assume must connect to the Northern Line, which also stops in Elephant and Castle, and which may also explain the Kennington Loop, a piece of track where a train could theoretically pass in the opposite direction under the cover of darkness and not be spotted by others using the tube. It makes for a compelling theory, but in all reality, nowadays the idea has been put to bed if you simply Google photos of the construction of the new skyscrapers in the area. It's clear from photos found online that if a bunker did exist, it would have to be deep underground in order to make way for foundations to support 4 major new skyscrapers. So once again, we have to say this myth is busted. But of course, if the powers that be did really want to hide something new, what better than to put it in the basement under 4 skyscrapers? Thanks for joining me for this fun, slightly different episode. These little Mythbusters episodes are always a lot of fun, and if you have any suggestions of tales I can include in the future, do let me know. Be sure to pop them in the YouTube comments or on my social media. Find me at Macabre London on Instagram and at Macabre London on Twitter and TikTok. As I said in the intro, there will be an exciting drop in the feed today and also a little video here on YouTube too. So if you're interested in learning more about my other show, Killers, Cults and Queens, which is back for the long-awaited season 2, then do make sure you check that out, or just cut out the middleman and go and listen to the first 2 episodes right now, wherever you get your podcasts. And if that's not enough of my shenanigans for you, then do be sure to also check out my Patreon, where you can get even more bonus episodes of my Patreon exclusive podcast, Having a Problem, and lots of other bits and bobs too. All support goes straight back into making the show, my newspaper subscriptions, editing software, and also my much needed coffee bill. So you know you're helping to make the show just by contributing even a little bit. It's all hugely helpful. So if you'd like to contribute to making the show, then do head to patreon.com/Macabre London. If you're listening to the podcast, then head over to YouTube to see the faces and places I talk about included in the video version of the show, and also me hosting it too. Just search for Macabre London Podcast and don't forget to say hi in the comments and subscribe whilst you're there. For the coolest and comfiest merch known to man, visit macabrelondon-shop.fourthwall.com, which if you sign up to Patreon, you also get a nice discount on merch. And if you're watching on YouTube, the merch is just hanging around under the video, so it's very easy to access. Just click on the products. I've personally been wearing my Macabre London long sleeve t-shirt now for the cooler months, and it's definitely one of my favourite comfy pieces in my wardrobe. And if you have any suggestions for new designs, let me know. A big thanks to my amazing top tier Patreon producers, Christina, Christophe, Heather's Leg, Lisa, Mary, Ravelle, Sally, Sam, Sarah, Terri, Teresa and Veronica, and all of our other fantastic patrons too. Don't forget to check out the sponsor of today's episode, Magic Mind, as well. Just head to magicmind.com/MacabreLT and use my code MacabreLT20 for up to 48% off your subscription. Thanks for joining me for another macabre tale from London's past. I've been Nikki Druce. Remember to stay spooky, and I'll see you ghouls next time for something a little spooky for our Halloween special.